Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And today we are reviewing Women Talking, which finally is in theaters with a wide theatrical release in the US after being pushed back several times.
And you saw this originally like 3 months ago, right?
I saw this in November at the Twin Cities Film Fest. There was just a single showing, and it was a completely sold-out screening, which was really cool.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
But it's been tough because, I mean, I can just say right now, it's one of my favorite movies of the year, and I've had to wait a very long time to talk about this with anyone I know. I've been able to read other reviews from people who saw it at early screeners. I think it showed at Telluride and maybe TIFF as well, but it's finally here, playing in theaters now. And Dylan, what is it about?
Yes, Women Talking. Do nothing, stay and fight, or leave. In 2010, the women of an isolated religious community grapple with reconciling a brutal reality with their faith. Which is an interesting, synopsis. But I guess more specifically, it's about women in a Mennonite colony. And essentially the men have been sexually assaulting and abusing them in their sleep for years, and they just found out. And so they caught 5 of them, of the men, and all the rest of the men in the colony. And we're probably talking like, what, 100, 150 people?
I mean, it seems like it's well over 100.
Yeah. All the men go into town to help post bail and argue for the men to be freed because the men are taken to jail. And they tell the women that they have 48 hours to forgive the perpetrators. And all the women realize that this has been going on for years. So they have a big, first they have a vote, and then they have a discussion to decide what should we do. And that's kind of the premise.
Right. Where did you see that it was 5? Because I have seen this a couple times now, and I feel like they just catch one. Was that like written somewhere?
No, they catch one, and he snitches on the others. So they have 5 of them in the pen.
Oh,
When she like attacked. I saw it yesterday. I'm pretty sure it was 5 because I think.
Yeah, I don't recall ever hearing or seeing the number 5. I just know they caught some of them. He named others. So I was curious where you saw that, because
I'm pretty sure. I think maybe you need to see it again, Nate. I'm pretty sure it was 5 of them, because it gets brought up like, but it was only 5, and they're like, yeah, but all the other men are like co-signing for their behavior. Like,
well, sure. I mean, the ultimate number is far more than it ever should be.
Yes.
Really the point. I will go see this again probably at some point. But so, I mean, first we can talk about, this did get a Best Picture nomination, and it's also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay for Sarah Polley, who's also the director. And this movie has a stacked cast. Really.
Yes,
I mean,
it's a really good ensemble. And also, just so people know, it is kind of in the style of I don't know, like movies like Mass from last year, or obviously like 12 Angry Men if we want to go way back. But it's a movie that's mostly a group of people in one place having a discussion, and that's kind of the driving force. So, just so people are aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And like One Night in Miami.
Yep.
More recently. One thing that I find really impressive, when we get to the cast in a minute, is how much this doesn't feel like a play. Because, I mean, it isn't adapted from a play, but it would be really easy, I think, to make something like this and just have everybody watch it and think like, oh yeah, this is just an adaptation of a stage production.
I think so, for sure. Yeah.
But I think there are some choices that Sarah Polley makes. I mean, first off, there's the voiceover from one of the teenage characters. I believe it's Otji, played by Kate Hellett.
Yep.
And that was an interesting choice too, because the book is all from August's perspective, because he's the one who wrote everything down.
Okay, yep.
And so they initially had Ben Whishaw doing the voiceover, but they kind of got done with it and thought it didn't feel right to have the voiceover be from the only real male character in the movie. So they kind of changed it in post-production and switched it to have Otji sort of telling the story to a future child of one of the characters, which I found really effective. And then kind of the use of really quick flashbacks to sort of show the reaction for many of the characters when they kind of discovered what had been happening to them. I think those are a couple of the things that prevent this from feeling like something like Ma Rainey.
Yeah.
Where you just really feel the stage and the theatricality, like that part of it. And that's a trap I think this could have fallen into, and it doesn't.
Agreed.
But to get into the cast, we have Rooney Mara, Claire Foy, Jessie Buckley, Ben Whishaw, and then Frances McDormand is a producer, and she's in the movie for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then a little lesser known, Judith Ivey, Sheila McCarthy, Kate Hellett, I mentioned. So a lot of A-listers, and the ones who aren't are also just great performances. One thing that really works for me here too is that it's 3 families that are elected to make this decision. So we get 3 different generations of women here.
Yep.
And I thought that added a lot of interesting different perspectives, and the way that the story plays with those perspectives, and kind of the way that the different ages of the women here might change the way they're reacting to everything. Like, even right away, the 2 teenage girls are like, this is boring. Can we just make a decision and be done with this?
Yeah, I thought it was like you said, because it's families, you do get these younger girls who are just like, they are there and they feel like they should be there, but they also just kind of are in the background, amusing themselves, tying their hair together, whatever, just being kids while these very serious discussions are going on. But it's interesting because obviously the discussions affect them and their future lives, and they also have, a voice in what should be, in the decision. So, but yeah, that was very interesting. Kind of, it kind of helped break it up from just a deadly serious talk for like an hour straight, when you have this other stuff going on.
Yeah.
It's not like they're sitting in a conference room or anything. They're just kind of in a barn.
Yeah, in a hayloft.
And
I mean, I do want to mention too that this movie does have, I think, a surprising amount of humor in it. It's definitely funnier, and there are lighter moments than you would expect based off like really the trailers and just kind of the color palette of this movie.
Yeah.
And just the general topic and the subject matter of what's going on here and what's being discussed. I mean, these are still people who are at times using humor to kind of process what's happened to them. And sometimes they all just sort of start spontaneously laughing because somebody said something maybe a little ridiculous, and they pause and they just kind of need to let it out a little bit. And I think that helps this a lot as well, because it does allow you, it breaks it up.
Yeah, the audience can take a breath too. And those little funny moments feel very appreciated when they happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also does a good job of sort of spreading out the big moments, quote unquote, for some of the A-listers. Like, each of them kind of has a signature moment or two where it's basically just the camera's on them. They've got a monologue here and just kind of go. And it's like a moment that their character's been building towards, whether it's Rooney Mara or Jessie Buckley. Claire Foy has a couple. Ben Whishaw gets one eventually as well. So by doing that and kind of breaking it up, and they take a break for lunch at one point or something, so there are different things going on here that prevent this from just being a 100-minute straight discussion.
Yeah, seminar.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree. I agree. I think it's when we were reviewing like Ma Rainey's and One Night in Miami, the ones that were based on plays, there was kind of the scale of how much was added by bringing it to the big screen instead of having just a play. And I feel like with this one, I felt like it worked better as a movie. And I didn't get that same feeling like I got sometimes with those other ones.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And then, I mean, we already mentioned the cast, but I mean, in particular, who are the standouts for you? Because it's definitely, you got a lot of big names in there, and also, the way they're kind of bouncing off each other, and like they each have their own arc. But I mean, who is like your standout?
So for me, at least from a character perspective, I really, really like Rooney Mara's performance. She's just kind of she's a little more contemplative, and I think it's hard to pick like one I mean, I think every performance in this movie is fantastic, and we've been talking for years about how the Oscars need a best ensemble
Yeah.
category.
Oh yeah,
This
for sure.
is the perfect example for why. There's not really a lead, but I like the way that Rooney Mara's character is. She's sort of more contemplative and sort of dreamy than the just sort of venom and anger that you feel from Jessie Buckley and Claire Foy for different reasons.
Yep.
I just think they all balance off each other really nicely, and the two older women are both phenomenal as well. I think that was Sheila McCarthy and
And
Judith
Judith
Ivey.
Ivey. Yeah, I was going to say Judith Ivey was actually the standout for me. Like from the very beginning, maybe because she wasn't a familiar face, but like I like it because for the first part of kind of the discussion, she's kind of the moderator and she's very smiley and she's trying to stay above it all. When two people are bickering, she's the one to come in and be like, all right, well, let's just, what's your opinion? But then later she does kind of have like a very, like she loses her temper and does snap at them. And then also she has a very contemplative kind of moment where she's coming to grips with like realizing that like her whole life, all of the decisions have been made by men. And like I liked that we got different sides of her. I felt like it's funny that Rooney Mara was your favorite. She was actually my least favorite because I felt like I felt like a lot of the other actors, like especially Jessie Buckley, like she's so angry for most of it, but then later, like you start to see why, and then when she comes out, like I feel like they had more arc and more variation. I felt like Rooney Mara
Yeah.
was kind of the same the whole way through, and I don't know, it was just kind of I don't know. It wasn't doing it for me. I liked the other. She was actually my least favorite, but I
I
really
mean,
liked Jessie
I can
Buckley, and
see.
I really liked both the older ladies as well,
Yeah,
especially
they're
Judith
great.
Ivey. Like I think she should get nominated for. If I would have nominated Judith Ivey for a supporting.
Yeah,
As
and I mean, that's why I
a
tried to sort of specify that I liked Rooney Mara's performance in contrast to the rest of them.
Yeah.
Just because it was a different perspective, and she's kind of the one who sort of just approaches it from a different angle and kind of leads the conversation in more interesting directions. And I think that's why I connected to her performance a little bit more, because she's the one who kind of says like, well, if we stay and fight, like, what does winning look like? What are we trying to accomplish if that's what we decide to do? Because forgiving them, that has a clear ending. Leaving, that has a clear ending. But what's this like? We should, she brings different questions and broader questions to the whole group. And that's where I thought that was effective. I can definitely see her sort of more mellow.
She's very
dreamy-eyed.
level-headed the whole time, and I just feel like because of the circumstances that she in particular is in, when things started, I was expecting a big emotional explosion from her at some point, considering her where she's at. But
Right.
instead, it was like she zigged when I thought she was going to zag, and instead she was the most level-headed and the most kind of like, well, I think we're going to be okay, or maybe we won't. Like, she was just very, like, everyone else was like, oh my God, like freaking out, like our whole lives and this crime and like, what are we going to do? And she was just very much like, well, yeah, like that's just the impression I got from her.
Yeah, but I guess it's different from the rest of them, and that's why it stood
It
out to
is.
me. And I did find it effective, and mostly just it does a very good job at presenting different reactions that people will have. I think they kind of touch
Yeah.
on every different possible way you can react to a situation like this, where it sort of reminded me a little bit in that sense only of something like Annihilation, where the 5 women who travel together are all kind of different ways you'd react to like cancer, basically.
Oh yeah, I
And
definitely
Women
picked up
Talking
on.
gives us this as well, where there's even a point where Jessie Buckley's just like, she's just spewing venom
Yeah, she
for
has
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
the
pent
movie, and
up.
she scolds another woman for having panic attacks.
Yep.
And I find this a very interesting performance for Jessie Buckley, because her character is extremely unlikable for about 85% of the movie.
She is,
Even
which was
even
wearing on me, but then
That's what I mean. Even going into it and like understanding the circumstances, and you're just constantly like, okay, she deserves to be upset. She deserves to just be upset. this opinion is totally valid, and she keeps pushing it
Mm-hmm.
to that next level, and really makes you start to think like, God, you're just mean. And then, like you said, like some things are revealed about her character that kind of bring it full circle. And
Mm-hmm.
I think every single performance in this movie is fantastic. I mean, we mentioned Kate Hallett at the beginning as well as
Mm-hmm.
one of the teenagers.
Yeah,
Her
the
voiceover
kids.
work is really good and adds a lot of weight. And I think especially right off the bat, that's what really hooked me. The way that is presented and some of
Mm-hmm.
the lines, like just the writing there for what her character has to deliver
Yeah,
with
yeah,
some sort of perspective. I thought that was incredibly powerful. So
yeah.
just
The kids were great
completely like standout performances across the board for me.
for sure. I guess yeah. Well, should we just get to the stars and then we can discuss it a little more?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
So we will be right back with our star ratings.
All right. I will go first because you have seen this movie twice and had much more
Yep.
time to contemplate it. I saw
Mhm.
it and like 24 hours ago, so I've not had as much time.
Right.
Um, so I think first off, the themes and the message of this movie and what it's trying to say is 100% like correct and I agree with. First off, like this movie is making a lot of points that need to be made, and that is great. And there's really great performances. And I do like to think that I do like, or I'm open to movies that are kind of constructed this way, kind of long conversation, single location. Like I really liked Mass. Um, and I did like this movie, but there were some things that brought it back a little bit for me. So I'm going to settle on a 3.5. So I think this is very good. One, you mentioned the color palette before. It was definitely an artistic choice, and I've read that she did it to kind of represent how this place is kind of stuck in the past. But
Mhm.
it with the subject matter and everything being so heavy, kind of the drabness and the faded colors, I don't know. It was just very I don't know. It just made everything kind of harder for me to be entertained at all and not just kind of just like, yeah. Like, I don't know. It was,
Sure.
I would have liked a little brighter colors or something. There was still some beautiful shots though. I really liked the music. However, I didn't like that when they do finally go to credits, they just do the silent credits because I also feel like with a movie this heavy that's kind of putting the audience through these different paces, when you end it and it's straight silence, there's just a feeling in the theater that's just like I don't know. I need a little violin to break the tension or something. Like it felt like
Yeah.
it ended and no one wanted to speak or move. Like everyone was like like I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean, they do start playing music during the credits once they get to, like, the cast, but there's a moment for, like, a minute or 2
Mhm.
where it's just silence, and I did feel that as well,
Mhm.
so
And then lastly, I guess the conversation. I felt like the conversation got a little bit repetitive in the middle. It felt like in the middle of the movie, it kind of dragged, mostly just at the point where it's 48 hours, so they're having these discussions, and then they agree, like, all right, we're gonna go to bed. We'll come back in the morning. And then when they come back in the morning, it kind of felt like they had to kind of retread the same discussions that they had before. Like I don't know. There was just a little bit in the middle where I felt like it kind of dragged. So I really liked it. And I definitely get the impression that everything that I saw and everything that was shown for a reason. Like, for instance, we never see any of the male perpetrators. We don't. And I think
yeah.
that's definitely, there's a point to that. We don't see really any of the men besides Ben Whishaw, and they certainly don't have like speaking parts. And I think that makes sense because it's like, this movie is about women and giving their perpetrators lines and like agency in the story is not like, I get it. That was a great, that decision makes sense thematically, but also I found it hard to feel the emotional weight of what they were dealing with, just kind of being dropped in and never seeing it, only hearing about it. It just
I
made it a
had
little
no
like,
problem with that at all, especially with the flashbacks that we see in, like, the first shot of the movie.
yeah,
I mean, I
but
I I don't know. I felt this from the second the movie started.
Yeah, I don't know. I did not quite as much as I wanted to. And even like especially with like the older ladies who they've been living like their whole lives under this, I don't know. Like I said, I think I'm definitely willing to rewatch it to see it again, and because I do think it's very well made, and I think it's deserving of the nomination. But just 3.5 for me so far. So I think it's very good.
So I'm giving this a 4.5, and I'm really close to a 5. I haven't
Mhm.
connected to a movie like this on an emotional level probably since Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Like I said, the moment this movie starts with the voiceover and that shot from above of Rooney Mara's character, and just all the way through, I connected to and hung on to every single word that was said by every one of these characters. And I
Mhm.
think part of it does feel a little repetitive, but they're making a life altering decision. And I think it's just sort of human nature to kind of double back and triple back sometimes. And even when they do feel like they're touching on the same thing, oftentimes they're revealing something new about one of the characters while they're doing it.
Mhm.
So I think all the performances are great. Basically, holding this back from a 5 for me is kind of how the movie looks,
Mhm.
which doesn't really prevent me from connecting to it at all. But
Mhm.
I do agree with you that I wish it hadn't been quite as exaggerated, maybe, or at least like certain moments could have looked different. Like it didn't need to look like that from beginning to end, I thought.
Yeah, like maybe yeah, I think there was opportunities because they are in the country, beautiful
Right.
farmland. There were
Mhm.
opportunities for some sweeping kind of like
Yeah.
incredible shots, and there are a few sweeping shots that kind of cover the whole colony, which I did like because it gave me an
Yep.
idea of the scale,
Yeah.
of this community. But
And then the only other thing is there's a calling it a subplot is almost giving it more weight than it even really has, but there's a little story or kind of added part of a trans character that I don't think any of the execution there is poor,
hmm
and I don't think it's unimportant, but it's such a little part of the story that I either kind of wanted more or not at all.
uh-huh.
Where it sort of
I know
feel
what you mean.
yeah, it didn't feel like it was adding anything to the movie, and that might not be the case for the book. And that's not to say that this isn't it's hard with something like that because nothing about it in the movie is done poorly. But when they're
hmm
having this whole discussion to kind of add this other element in there for like little 2-minute bits a couple of times,
hmm
it felt a little distracting, and I found that a little bit tough. But also,
Okay.
I think this had only been going on for like 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
So I don't think it's something that like the older women in the colony had been living with for like 50 years or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure how
Yeah.
long if it was something that has happened to all of them for a long time or just
Mhm.
just recently because I guess well yeah we're not gonna go into spoilers but
Right.
yeah okay
But yeah, anyway, this is either my number 1 or number 2 movie of the year. I think I mean, you and I talked about this off camera a little bit, how kind of weak of a crop of Best Picture nominees we feel like this is.
yeah
And there
yeah
are basically 3 or 4 of the 6 that I even like at all,
hmm
and this is the only one that I can confidently say that I love.
yeah I agree I think we got a pretty weak group of contenders and I
Yeah.
I like this one certainly more than I liked Triangle of Sadness
Yes, we might
which
be talking about that one at some point,
yeah
because
we'll
it
do a
is a
review
movie that I think would be fun to kinda lay into a little bit, so
and then I'm going to be watching The Fablemans tonight, so we'll see.
yeah.
Um, all right. Well, yeah. All right. Well, there we go. So 4.5 from Nate, one of his favorites of the year. I give it a strong 3.5, and then yeah, just one more shout out to Judith Ivey. I just thought she killed it. I had never
Yeah,
seen her before in
absolutely.
anything. She was fantastic.
Totally agree.
Um, all right. With that being said, is it your turn to put a wrap on the show?
It is.
All right, take it away.
Freedom is good, it is better than slavery. Forgiveness is good, it is better than revenge. And hope of the unknown is good, it is better than hatred of the familiar.